So now, what is data processing in research methods? Data processing in research is the collection and translation of data into valuables and usable information. So data is only number. So whatever you collected in the questionnaire or through the interview schedule, we are going to put those in and convert those into useful information. Okay, so that's why we need to process the data. So through this process, the researcher, the data engineer, the data scientist takes raw data and he or she converts it into more readable format and as a ready reckoner. So it will be put up in a table, or it will be put up in a chart, or it will be a graphical representation. So either it could be done manually or through an automated tool. So the researcher will then use this information to gain insights, solve problems, making improvements, and ultimately generate better results. So what are the stages of data processing? The first and foremost thing is data collection. Data collection is a process of extracting data from available sources such as data warehouses and data lakes. So only in primary data you collected for the first time by the researcher. But there are secondary sources where you can retrieve the data which is collected for some other purpose. So you got data warehouses and data lakes. So the raw data can come into several forms, from user behavior to monetary figures to profit statement, or it could be even web cookies, So anything could be a data. It's not only the numbers. So the type of raw data that you collect will have a significant impact on the output you later produce. So researchers should always look into the accuracy of the data, the trustworthiness, and comprehensive sources for valid and usable findings. So the ingredient should be good, only then after you process, you get meaningful information. After you collect the data, you need to prepare the data. So through data preparation, we will polish, organize, filter, and examine raw data for error. So the data preparation stage is meant to eliminate incorrect, redundant, or incomplete data and convert it into suitable form for further processing and for the analysis part. The goal of the preparing stage is to achieve the highest data quality possible. So the input, now we should, when you talk about a process, it's nothing but input, throughput, and an output, isn't it or not? So the input stage is the first stage where the raw data begins to resemble the usable information. So once the data is clean, we will enter it into the corresponding designation, such as data warehouse or customer relationship management software, and translate that into compactable language for these systems. You can enter this data using numerous input sources, including keywords, scanners, or even digitizers. Now the data is being processed. When you put the data into the computer, particularly now it is automated, and you can conduct data processing using machine language and artificial intelligence algorithm to generate the desired input, but the processing will still vary based on the data sources and intended output use. So now you may be wondering, what, madam, you are telling like artificial intelligence, machine learning? Yes, it becomes very simple. There are many tools like R Studio. You need not do any coding process, like the drop down menu, like you can easily process the data and come out with some meaningful interpretation. Starting from Excel spreadsheet, like test of significance and all could be done with an Excel spreadsheet itself. Okay, so there are many tools available nowadays. So you can use the data from the processing stage in a variety of ways, for creating, even for the medical diagnosis, to determining customers' needs, to drawing connections between advertising patterns. So the methodology is used in almost all the fields. If you would have attended my first unit of the research methodology presentation, so you would understand that research methodology is useful for all segments. It is not only meant for the business administration. Okay. So now, once the data has been processed, you store the data. After processing it, you store it because you can use it for the later purpose. So when companies properly store this data, they remain compliant with the data protection legislation and promote a faster and easier way of accessing information, particularly nowadays the CRM. So data is like oil nowadays, like it's so important. So you could see, based on your search pattern, you will have pop-up messages. So the tracking is done through the analytics only. So they can also use this data as input for the processing cycle. So there are three methods of data processing. It is manual data processing, mechanical data processing, and electronic data processing. So in manual data processing, the user process the data manually, as the name implies, and they carry out step by step without using any electronic mode or any software. So though this method is the least expensive and requires minimal resources, it can be more time consuming and it has got higher risk of producing errors. So the mechanical data processing, see, when you talk about manual data processing, when automated machines through conveyors, if the products come, so when you have got quality check done manually, like the people are finding out how many products, supposing if it is chocolates, and you find out how many chocolates are not wrapped up properly, like, so the human being tend to err on oversight, like there's the you may miss out the erratic ones. So mechanical data processing involves the use of machines and devices to filter data, such as calculators, then printing presses or typewriters. So this method is suitable for simple data processing endeavors, and it produces fewer errors, but it's more complex than other techniques. The third one is the electronic data processing. Here, the researcher process data using modern data processing softwares and technologies, where they feed any instruction set to the program to analyze the data and create a yield output. Though this method is the most expensive and is also fastest and reliable for generating accurate output. So, supposing you take softwares like SPSS. So, what happens is it is a licensed software where you need to pay for it. Okay, so the benefits of data processing in quantitative research is it is very easier for the report building. Higher processing speed is there, and cost reduction is there. Simple storage, greater data accuracy, regulatory compliance is there, and lots of security is involved in it. And it has got a smooth collaboration. Okay, so you need to understand about the data what you have collected. Next comes editing of data. Editing of data is a process of examining the raw data to detect if there is any errors and omissions. You should see that whether it's legible, it is complete, it is consistent and accurate. The recorded data must be legible so that it could be coded later. Any illegible responses may be corrected to get in touch with the person. Supposing you collect data through questionnaire, and if it is unfilled one, then you can revert back to the respondent and ask him to actually answer the questions uh, with the informed consent. Okay, so completeness involves that all the items in the questionnaire. That's what I said. So you can ask the person again. So in case of the former, it is quite likely that the interviewer will not remember the answer. So in such a case, the respondent may be contacted, and then supposing if there is a data collector for your work, and then he has not done it. So if he is not able to recollect, straight away you can go to the respondent and ask him for the request him for the results. It's very important to check whether or not the respondent is consistent in answering the questions. For example, there could be a respondent claiming that he makes purchases by credit card, but he may not even have one. So you have to check whether, first of all, he has got usage to it. The inaccuracy of the survey data may be due to interviewers' bias or cheating. One way of spotting is to look for common patterns of responses in the instrument of a particular interviewer. Editing of data, so you can do it in two stages. One is field editing, another one is central editing. Editing of data in field editing, it consists of review of the reporting forms by the investigator itself for completing or translating what the letter has written in abbreviation form to the time of interviewing the respondent. So sometimes we may write abbreviations, like shortcuts. So this form of editing is necessary in view of writing of the individuals, which vary from individual to individual. Sometimes it becomes very difficult for the tabulated to understand. So field editing can be done. And then central editing should be carried out when all the forms of the schedule have been completed and is returned to the headquarters. So this type of editing requires that all the forms are thoroughly edited by a single person in a small field study or a small group of persons in case if it is a large study. So the editor must correct the obvious errors such as entry in the wrong place, entry recorded in daily terms, whereas it should be recorded in weeks and months, etc. Then there comes very important coding of data. So whenever my students do, they what happens is the coding part, they obviously do errors. Like for strongly agree, we need to give 5. For agree, we need to give 4. So what they do is they give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even the brilliant student commit that error. So the coding has to be done in a proper way where you can assign any symbols or numerical values so that the responses can be recorded into limited number of cases or categories. So the classes should be appropriate to the research problem which is being studied. There must be exhaustive and must be mutually exclusive so that the answer can be placed in one and only one cell in a given category. So further, every class must be defined in terms of only one concept. So the coding is necessary for the efficient analysis of the data. The coding decision should be usually taken at the designing stage of the questionnaire itself, so that the likely responses to questions are pre-coded. So this actually simplifies the computer tabulation of data for further analysis. So it must be noted that any errors in coding should be eliminated altogether or at least be reduced to the minimum possible level. See, what happens is, like, some students, what they do is, some researchers, you need to have uniformity in coding. Supposing you wanted to compare about the service quality, so you need to have uniformly 5-pointed scale for all the items. Supposing you give 4-point scale to one and 5-point scale to the other, so what happens is, like, the comparison becomes very cumbersome. So you have to keep it in mind that while coding it, how is that you're going to code? Supposing in one particular questionnaire, a student had 5-point scale and 10-point scale. So what we did was, during the coding process, since that particular question was very, very important, the 10-point scale was mellowed down to 5-point scale. So 1 and 2 is combined together to have 1. 3 and 4 was combined together as 2. So you should do the coding because the tabulation should be in such a way that you should not have any errors, particularly during comparison. So the coding of an open-ended question is more tedious than the closed-ended question. For a closed-ended or structured question, so what do we do with an open-ended question? Like, if you have asked suggestion for future improvement, for the overall growth of the organization, so what happens is they will actually describe in terms of verbatim. So what you do is, we can use sentimental analysis where the verbatim has been converted into attitudes like positive, negative, and then you give phrase for that, and you can even give neutral. Okay, so the coding scheme is very simple and designed prior to the field work. For example, you consider the following questions. So supposing the coding, that's what I'm trying to explain to you right now. Supposing you ask them a question like, what is your gender? So male and female. So male could be marked 0 and female could be marked 1. So these codes may be specified prior to the field work, and if the codes are done on all the questions of the questionnaire, it will be said to be wholly pre-coded one. So if it is monthly income, like what you can do is, we can give 1 to less than rupees 5,000, and then from there onwards it can go up to 4. Okay. Then data creation in SPSS. So when you open up SPSS program, it will see a blank spreadsheet in the data view. So we have already have another data set open, but we want to create a new one. So what we need to do is, you open up file, you go to new data to open up a blank spreadsheet. So it also resembles an Excel spreadsheet, but you have got two dimension here. One is data view and other one is variable view. Okay, so you will also notice that each row is labeled with a number 1, 2, 3, so on. So the rows will represent cases that will be part of your data set. When you enter values for your data in the spreadsheet cells, each row will correspond to a specific variable, okay, the column, and a specific row. So now the data creation in SPSS, so you need to go to the variable view, type the name for your first variable under the name column. So you can also enter other information about the variable such as the type, the width, the decimals, label, etc. Type the name for each variable that you plan to include in your data set. In this example, one will be type school class, since one plan to include a variable for the class level of each student. So here it is 1 for first year, 2 for second year, 3 and 4 for fourth year. It will also includes specify 0 decimal, since my variable values will only include whole numbers. Okay, so data creation, you need to go to the data view tab. So any variable names that you entered in the variable view will now be included in the columns. So one variable name, so we have entered there, no, school and class, so that here appears in the data view. So one variable name you can see there, what is that we have entered in the variable view. Okay, so now you can enter values for each case from the questionnaire. The classes what they are studying. Are they studying first standard, second standard, third standard? All these things from the questionnaire you can actually enter the data in this. It is very easy, man, like entering data in SPSS. Only data entry is important. The drop down menu will do all the analysis for us just by a click of a mouse. So in this example, the cases represent the student. That's what you could see here. And for the data creation in SPSS, repeat the steps for each variable that you will include in your data set. So don't forget to periodically save your progress as you keep on entering the data. So you can open up even Excel file into SPSS. So for that, what you can do is file open. Supposing you are collecting data through Google form. So it goes to a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. So you can import it. You can import the Excel sheet to SPSS. Okay, you select file name, click read variables name in the first row of the spreadsheet, then which contains the column heading also. Then click open. You can open it. So I told you there are two ways to get data into SPSS. You can either type it directly into the data, or you can open up the existing file which is already there. Okay. Then make sure data is formatted and described. You need to have in the rows, you need to have cases, and the columns you need to have variables. So each column represents a variable which is being measured. Okay, so for example, the answers to a specific question on a questionnaire defines its own variable. As such, the row represents the variable for all variables. The cell contains the values. So each cell contains a single value of a variable for a case. So now creating and importing data, once you have the data opened in the data editor, click the variable view tab at the bottom of the data editor. In this view, each variable is now a row, and you must make sure that all your variables are defined appropriately. The most important distinctions are we need to look into the typology error. The most common types are numeric, used for quantitative data. They are numbers with no commas and a period delimiting the decimal places. So SPSS will never allow you to enter non-numeric characters into a cell of a numeric type. Okay, so it's used for dates or times from the menus of format string, used for qualitative data. We need to avoid symbols such as asterisk, plus, minus, and all. So creating and importing data, there are 3 levels of measurement. So I taught you in scales, 4 different types of scales. They are ordinal, nominal, interval, and ratio. But in SPSS, we could see only ordinal, nominal, and we have got only one other thing, which is scale, which is a combination of ratio as well as for interval. Okay, so we can find only 3. here in SPSS. So the values, if you have a numerical value representing qualitative data, such as the gender, 1 for male and 0 for female, then you will probably want this to be the labeled accordingly in the graph and output. So you can click on the cell in the value column for that variable, and you can assign the labels for each value, so that when you generate the pie chart or the bar diagram or the frequency table, you can get exactly male and female and the frequencies. Okay, so SPSS software for editing and analyzing all sorts of data, as I've already told you. So Google Analytics or even the server log files of a website. So here, this is the SPSS data view. After opening data, SPSS placed them in a spreadsheet-like fashion as shown in the screenshot below. So this sheet called data view always displays our data values. So it has got a second sheet called the variable view, as I've explained you already. It looks like this, the variable view. Now coming to the analysis part, like how do you analyze your data in SPSS? So now we have input the data, and then we have cleansed the data, and then now we need to actually analyze the data. So now data analysis, doing so, open up a dialog box in which we select one or more variables and one or several statistics we will like to inspect. So here it is only checking in out. See here, you have to just go and check in this box. If you want to calculate mean value for the income, like you have to just click into this particular box and then check in mean value. Supposing you wanted to find out what is the minimum and maximum, then you wanted to find out standard deviation, you just check into it, click on top of it, you will get it done. Okay, so here you could see, like a descriptive, you asked for how much sample has given information, then you asked for the minimum value, maximum value, the mean value, and the standard deviation value. Okay, so this is what this is the output what you get in the output sheet. Okay, so output viewer window has a different layout and structure than the data editor window. That's what we saw earlier. Here it will come like this. Okay, it will be like in a Word file. Okay, so creating output in SPSS does not change your data in any way. So you can just like that move on to it. So SPSS contains all basic statistical test and multivariate test as well. So you can go in for t-test, chi-square test, ANOVA, correlation and other association measures. You can do regression, non-parametric test, factor analysis, cluster analysis, and many more as well. Okay, classification of data, you can classify them according to the attributes or numerical characteristics. So classification is nothing but the process of arranging things in groups or classes according to their resemblances and affinities, and gives expression to the unity of attributes that may subsist among a diversity of individuals. So the raw data collected in real situations and arranged haphazardly do not give a real picture, but to locate similarities and reduce mental strain, we resort to classification of data. So the classification condenses the data by dropping out unnecessary details. It facilitates comparison between two sets of data, clearly showing the different points of agreement and disagreement. So what are the primary rules we need to keep in mind for classification? It is given below. So there should not be any ambiguity in the definitions of classes. It will eliminate all doubts while including a particular item in a class. All the classes should be preferably having equal width or length. Only in some special cases, we use classes of unequal width actually. So the class limit should be selected in such a way that no value of the item in the raw data coincides with the value of the limit. So the number of classes should preferably be between 10 and 20, and either too long or too short. The classes should be exhaustive, like you need to have the raw data included in it. The classes should be mutually exclusive and non-overlapping. So the item of the raw data should fit in only to one class. So the classification must be suitable for the object of inquiry. The classification should be flexible and items included in each class must be homogeneous. Width of the class interval is determined by fixing first the number of class intervals and then dividing the total range by that number. So the primary difference between classification and tabulation is the process of classifying data is known as classification of data, whereas tabulation is the act of presenting data in a tabular form with a better outlook. Okay, better interpretation as well. So after the collection of data is completed, we are preparing the data to be presented. So here you do the editing, coding, and all these things. The graphical representations fall in line. So I've given you the difference between classification and tabulation. So order, like what happens is classification is done after data collection. Tabulation is also done after data collection. In classification, we arrange it in terms of attributes and values, but tabulation, we arrange it in terms of columns and rows. The purpose of classification is to analyze the data, whereas tabulation is to present the data. Bifurcates data into categories and subcategories. Tabulation, it bifurcates that into headings and subheadings. So type of classification, you can classification or ordinal classification you can do, or qualitative classification you can do. Quantitative classification also we can do. We can come out with chronological or temporal classification. Chronological is nothing but the order of occurrence. Geographical or spatial classification also can be done. Tabulation actually refers to the logical data presentation. A serial number will be allocated to the table in addition to self-explanatory title. So I told you, like after you do all the data collection analysis, the tabulation is very, very important because that is the information based on which it gives meaningful thing to the decision makers. Okay, so now here the statistical table, the complete upper part of the table that contains columns and subcolumns is there. Along with captions is the head box. So you need to have a number for the table and you need to write about what is given in the table. Okay. So tabulation, univariate analysis is the analysis of one univariable. Bivariate analysis, the analysis of exactly two variables. Multivariate analysis, the analysis of more than two variables. This is also there. So a survey of a classroom, the researcher may be looking into account the number of boys and girls. A single variable and the quantity as per the below table. The objective of univariate analysis to simply describe the data to find patterns within the data. So it can be looking into the mean value, median, mode, dispersion, variance. So I was showing, in the earlier slides, the example of what you have done. So in tabulation, actually, you can come out with distribution tables. You can come out with the pictorial representation of histograms, frequency polygons, pie chart, and bar chart. So univariate analysis can be done through SPSS. We call it as descriptive statistics. So you can find out, in the univariate analysis, like how you go about. See, like what you should do is like get into analyze. See here you could see drop down menu. Analyze, descriptive statistics, frequencies. So here now we have to select all the variables and take them into the empty box over here, variable. You take it over there. Okay, and when you take it over there, then you come out with the scatter plot. So this will give you a visual idea of the pattern that your variable follows. Okay, then bivariate analysis, you can come out with the descriptive statistics, regression analysis could be done. So regression analysis, nothing but it is the equation of a straight line. Okay, it is a dependency technique. So you can also use correlation as well, correlation coefficient. Okay, correlation is an interdependency technique. Okay, whether supposing if you take motivation and salary. So when you get more salary, you get motivated. When you get motivated, you get more salary. So both are correlated to each other. So you can find out what is the correlation coefficient, how far it is correlated. So the correlation value lies between -1 to +1. So that value you can actually find out over here. So multivariate analysis are also available. So it is factor analysis, cluster analysis, variance analysis, discriminant analysis, multidimensional scaling, and you got factor analysis where the other name for it is principal component analysis. So SPSS can be used both for descriptive statistics as well as for inferential statistics as well. It describes the data. It comes out with measures of central tendency, mean, median, the range, the highest and the lowest. Measures of spread also could be found out from here. Okay, so here you could see, you could see the output of SPSS. Frequency means count. Percentage. Supposing you have got 131 respondents, you can convert that into percentage. Then regarding the gender, how many passengers survived. For that also you can come out with the analysis and then you can put it over here. Okay. So now you can find out the mean value of the average. We should find whether the data what we have collected is falls under a normal distribution curve. And we need to find out whether it is skewed towards the right or it is skewed towards the left. So now what we do is it is a measure of how symmetric the distribution is. So the values of skewness close to 1 represents symmetric, whereas the values that are some high valued outliners and negative values means low valued outliners. Cortices actually values refers to how peaked the distribution is, how tall the inverted bell-shaped curve is. So a normal distribution would have a value of 0. Negative value means the distribution is flat in many cases in the extremes, and the positive value means the distribution is clustered in the center. Okay, so with this we come to the conclusion of this particular unit. See you soon in the next session.